job.
Okay, so if for those of you who came in a little late, we had a bit of an emergency, which is that um, my box here, the square here, uh, didn't work because my camera didn't work. And we were running around like crazy for the last half hour to figure out how to get the camera to work. And John had this amazingly brilliant suggestion of taking the plug and withdrawing, pulling the plug out and putting it back in for the camera. And after all of our machinations, I followed John's thought, and in 15 seconds, it worked. Worked. So here we are, and I'm not sure about the next improvisation, but I am sure that I know what I'm doing now. So uh, I'm very interested in hearing your thoughts about this theme of the triptych. Uh, Very, very interested, and I think that we should just start. So this is this. We're going to start with Rita, and
Hi.
oh, okay. Uh, uh, Wait a minute. Let's just start. Uh, this is Rita.
Hello. So, for those of you who were with us in spring of 2022, I wrote an essay then about the Fulbright Triptych. And now it is the Fulbright Triptych Revisited, adapted from my essay written spring 2022. An artist's studio, his inner sanctum. I wonder if the creative process and the mystery of life itself shall be here revealed. I wonder if the secrets shall be hidden in plain sight as I unfold the panels of a triptych and enter the room where it happens. I search to understand the magic by which a dauntingly blank three-panel wood canvas becomes the repository of those secrets. There are tantalizing clues, a child's scrawl, fragments of transformational art, snippets of writing, even a quote from the great novel Moby Dick. Quote, to me, the white whale is that wall shoved near to me. Sometimes I think there's naught beyond. I read it and I feel the artist's and man's existential dread before that ghostly wall. In awe of that primordial blank expanse, that white whale whose challenge must be met, the artist organizes the nothingness with his finely honed weapons and his penetrating vision. He precisely, relentlessly anoints the void with color, with oblique meaning, with textures and lines and geometric shapes, inserting heritage and humanity and enigma within the geometry. He organizes our gaze as he has organized his studio. It is a secular and modern triptych, yet filled with quiet spirituality, reverence for the Holy Trinity of the artist's family, for the comforting warmth of his home, for the tools of his trade, for the rich classical artistic past to which he is heir and which inspires him, for the rectangular mementos of mundane existence which give him daily sustenance. I lift each miniature pinned up homage to the simple and profound in art and in life, to past and present, in order to peer through the wormholes beneath and unmask the triptych's truth. I pry open the studio's painted windows to look past the Edenic blue horizon, to glimpse a more complicated Germany. I admire the meticulously aligned, sharply pointed instruments which carve answers in hieroglyphics into a copper plate. Composed, eyes focused, princely in blue velvet, humble in work boots, balanced by love of family and love of art, Simon Dinnerstein beckons us through the event horizon of that mystical, glowing gold leaf copper portal at the center of it all, to dimensions beyond the studio, where past, present, and future exist all at once, where our invisible map is drawn. Upon taking leave of the triptych, I fold the sides inward so Simon and Renee can hold hands as they fling open the studio windows with only the golden talisman between them. I step back to meditate on the eternal challenge of the looming void, the two closed blank canvases that now face me. And I wonder if there are, beyond that event horizon, yet two more panels for Simon to anoint.
It's incredible, absolutely incredible. You're outdoing yourself, Rita. Uh, and I'm very touched, honestly. And um, I think one statement that you made stayed with me in terms of my friend here in the other room, where you said organizes the messiness. That's good for her. Uh, and Enigma part was terrific. And past, present, and future existing at one is wonderful. Um, I have to think more about what you wrote. I mean, would you send it to me?
Sure.
Yeah, yeah, it's terrific. Uh, yeah, I must have thought about this quite a bit.
Well, I wrote something very similar in 2022, but
Yes,
edited and added to it.
yeah, no, but this is
Yeah.
even richer, I think.
Yeah.
Uh, um, Let me mull mull it, but wonderful. Um, Alan, I think you're next, and this is this is yours, Alan.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, we switched around. You should have been first, but Rita had some surgery today, and it's very wonderful that she chose to come, even having the surgery. Alan,
So, so anyway, I thought this would be fun. I don't know what kind of I got myself into here, but I decided to compare these two for a couple of reasons. But first, but because both of these triptychs, they're almost the same size. They're both around 13 feet by 7 feet. Although that was sort of interesting. And also that well, for some other reasons. I should just kind of read this. Um, the two triptychs are almost identical in size and proportion. Simon's triptych is not designed for the side panels to fold over the center panel as Bosch's piece does. However, the proportions of Simon's side panels are almost half the width of the center panel, which is similar to Bosch's proportions. Both artists were of similar age when they started these triptychs. Bosch was 30 years of age, and I think Simon, you were close to 30. However, Bosch spent about 11 years working on his piece,
hmm,
and Simon spent, I guess, about 4 years on his piece. So There are far more differences between far more differences than similarities between the two pieces. After all, the two pieces were painted almost 500 years and worlds apart. However, comparing them makes for an interesting exploration. The theme of the Garden of Earthly Delights can be viewed as an unconventional religious-based story, beginning on the left panel with the Garden of Eden showing the marriage of Adam and Eve by some unknown being performing the marriage ceremony. Is that God or Jesus? As far as it is known, there is no biblical story describing a marriage ceremony for Adam and Eve. The story continues to go off the biblical track, taking us to an outlandish, chaotic world. Perhaps the fact that Adam's and Eve's being exiled from the Garden of Eden sets the stage for what is depicted in the Garden of Earthly Delights center panel. We see a world with strange organic architecture appearing to emerge from the ground like plants, and a mass of naked humans having a revelry of devilish enjoyment and gaiety. It is if Pandora's box had been opened and demons set loose. Is this panel describing the time before the advent of civilization, or is it a commentary on the failure of civilization, as what happens if the structure and order of civilization collapse? There is a belief that if civilization fails, mankind will revert to a barbaric nature. The chaotic orgy of delights depicted here may illustrate the theory that mankind is inherently raw, selfish, and brutal when left to its own devices. We see a scene of looting, raping, and pillage with monsters that become the norm in the physical world. Is the breakdown of humanity being depicted here, or is this pure fantasy? It is no surprise then that at death, these human creatures ultimately fall into the deserved dark, hellish environment illustrated in the right panel, being hung on a gigantic harp or lute or consumed by a creature with a cauldron crown. After seeing the Garden of Earthly Delights, it is a delight to view Simon's Fulbright's triptych that has its own story. This triptych describes the artist's world with a hopeful view of mankind and the appreciation of order. It is obvious that art has had a major influence and effect on Simon's life and those of his family. It is a quiet and serene scene. All lines in the horizontal plane extend to a central vanishing point located at the distant horizon seen through the windows. The symmetry of Simon's triptych gives one a feeling of a balanced universe. The Garden of Earthly Delights is without this perspective. Bosch's noisy, unbalanced composition leaves the viewer with an unsettling feeling. Bosch's work has a pseudo-religious theme. Simon's clearly avoids religion. However, one wonders if the religious figures in the triptychs by, say, Van Eyck or Grunwald may have influenced Simon's side panel paintings of Renee and Simona as mother with child, and the bearded figure of himself, possibly reminiscent of a saint. Both triptychs are excellent examples of pictures in a picture. In both, one really needs to zoom in to appreciate the tremendous quantity of detail scenes in the Garden of Earthly Delights. And in the Fulbright triptych, the excellently rendered recreations of paintings, letters, and drawings on the wall, and the engraving plate and the associated tools on the desk. Both pieces are great examples of the kind of art that will pull from the viewer an emotional response. Lastly, both may be considered personal reflections of their inner conscience, the inner conscience of their artists, and perhaps also a window into the culture and society of their respective times.
A really terrific piece of writing, just terrific. Um, have you seen The Garden of Earthly Delights?
You know, I don't think so. I mean, we did go to the Prada when we were in Spain, and I just don't remember seeing it, unfortunately.
But
So I'm gonna have to make a trip back there to do
I'm
that.
sure if you saw it, you would remember it. Um, um, Alan, what do you think those architectural forms are in Bosch's painting?
I know, I don't know. To me, as I mentioned in the essay, they almost seem organic, like they're growing out of the ground. They're not something one would build. They look like they've grown there, most of them. They're very unusual, and it's like from another world. I
Don't
mean,
don't they seem dystopian, like almost science fiction?
yes, almost science fiction.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
If you were, I hope you can come next week. What would you want to ask Lynn Jacobs? Do you have a question?
well, no, I've been thinking about a couple of them. And I think one would be maybe why an artist would choose to do a triptych as opposed to another type of painting. What does the triptych do that like maybe a single large panel or even a what the other one's called like a diptych or quadrip quadriptych,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah. I get you.
what is special about
Yeah.
the diptych?
You had a second question?
No, I was thinking of I haven't come no, I think maybe I should have a second question, that's
No,
all.
no, 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 no. It's I actually found some more triptychs if we have time later to show you
Mm.
some more. Um, Rita, do you have a question for Lynn Jacobs
Not yet,
for next week?
but I will.
Okay, okay, great. So the next one is this is Susan. Susan, okay, Susan.
Okay. Yes, I'm going to fulfill Ron's statement that the triptych can elicit an emotional response. The first time I saw images of the Fulbright triptych, I was instantly reminded of what it was like to be in a foreign country for the very first time. Exactly my experience of my own Fulbright year of 1970-71. So I will discuss the triptych from the perspective of a first viewing, taking it as a whole, as it is. It was the windows that struck me forcibly. They take up almost half of the top of the central panel. They are right above Simon's work table. That work table is the reason Simon and Renee are in Germany on a Fulbright grant. His engraved plate is front and center on the work table. That table being removed from Germany by a simple sheet of glass. The landscape out the window is meticulously painted. The palette for the town and landscape is very different from the palette for the rest of the painting, which gives it a sense of otherness. Windows seem to impose a two-dimensionality on the scene framed. What is outside the window is real, but removed, maybe several times removed.
Mm.
When one is in a foreign place, one sees it often through windows, train windows, restaurant windows, hotel windows. And if one is living there for a time, one's own apartment windows. I often looked out my windows that year in Germany to see what the people who were at home were doing. I was not at home. The stove was different. The toilet was different. How hot water was produced was different. Was I different? What was I doing there?
Mm.
There sits Renee and Simon on either side of the windows, facing forward, looking seriously ahead, but maybe also with a gaze pointed inward. Here we are, they are saying, inside our space on the top floor apartment in a small town in Germany. This is us. Which brings me to all the items pasted up around them. These reproductions, letters, quotations, pictures rang a bell for me too from that Fulbright year. Maybe for anyone who has moved into strange surroundings. Over time, one pins up things that speak to one, that carry a significance, a question, a challenge, a confirmation.
Yeah.
These items may come from home, far away, or from the process, from the process of establishing oneself in a new place. A life, a confirming circumstance in one's immediate environment that one has pasted up oneself begins to take shape in the apartment. I like to think that all the items surrounding Renee and Simon were gathered there slowly, a record of the months spent during the Fulbright. My love for that why, out there in left field, is because if you say the name of the letter, it is the question one asks of oneself in a particular way when one lives overseas. Perhaps, as Simon has said, living away from the familiar and known makes the very human quest to find oneself even more pressing. With all the detail that Simon has in his triptych, his novel, as he has called it is truly a painting of identity, of how one finds one's way. For me, the Fulbright Triptych is a picture of that journey's success.
Again, super beautifully written, very touching, and Susan's, your grant was in German.
Yeah.
German literature?
Yes.
German literature. So
Yeah.
Susan had the exact grant that I had, but in German literature. And and your identification with a lot of these themes comes from your own living experience there. Yeah.
Yeah.
It is terrific, really terrific. Um, in the book on this painting, one of the things that the editor or publisher and I wanted was to have different points of view, not just art historians or art critics, but multiple points of view. And the point of view of another person who had the same grant living a year abroad would have been wonderful, really wonderful. Um, um, thank you, thank you. Um, okay, so the next one that I have is Kristen, which is is this right? Kristen, is this right?
Yes.
Oh, okay, great.
Let me get my words up. I did not have the time that I had hoped to dedicate to this, but I just chose a portion of each of these, Grunwald's Isenheim altarpiece and Simon's triptych, because it was so overwhelming to me to actually think about the whole of a triptych. So here goes. There is so much within each of these triptychs that the choices for what to focus on seem almost endless. How does an artist highlight its subject matter, particularly within a painting vast in scale and complexity? Each of these segments, highlighting mother and child, are crucial components to the entire story or novel contained in the larger triptychs.
Mm.
However, each could stand alone, rich in detail and feeling, sufficient to be a complete work in and of themselves. In both A Mother and Child are the central characters. We know who these women are. In the Isenheim altarpiece, because of the story itself. In the Fulbright triptych, by fortunate virtue of knowing the artist. We know Renee and Mary, Simon and Jesus. The eye is drawn directly to the relationship shared by the mother and baby in each, but these are very different interactions between the two mothers and children. Renee is serious and still, as if posing for the image, a snapshot of her, with a slightly more active baby Simona in her lap, not quite looking straight on like her mother, but off at something else, perhaps more interesting, as she playfully wiggles her hands together in such a charming way. Mary and Jesus, on the other hand, are locked into one another with their eyes, not posing, but expressing tender affection toward each other. The nakedness of both infants helps to portray their dependence on their mothers, their yet untainted innocence. Both mothers are draped in beautiful clothing of vivid and rich hues, lending elegance to these figures. Jesus, by contrast, is wrapped in rags, an indication of his humble birth, and Simona in nothing at all. Jesus and Mary are caught in a moment, with Mary's head and halo making up the top of the central pyramid of this image, the folds of her heavy, glamorous dress leading our eye down to the bottom of this pyramidical focus. Mary lifts Jesus upward toward her, while Jesus, with his very oddly formed fingers, deftly holds and moves a string of beads, perhaps rosary beads, with agility that would be impossible for a child of this young age. Jesus is the center of this image, his bright little body, white cloth, and even the light shimmering below him on Mary's dress pull the eyes into him. In the Fulbright triptych, the eyes are drawn to Renee as the central figure here, with baby Simona's toes providing the bottom point of the circle of details surrounding Renee, telling her story. If one starts at the tip of Simona's left foot and circles up and around all of the smaller images back down to the top of her right foot, Renee is perfectly framed. And on to those details, briefly, all the other details. Each image surrounding Renee could probably have its own 4-minute story that helps the reader to know who she is and what she is about. A teacher, a mother, a woman, someone who loves art, and more. The details surrounding Mary help to tell her story, but they also tell Jesus' story. There are a few concrete objects around Mary, like with Renee, a rose, the symbol of Mary, the door of the cave with a cross on it, or perhaps representing Jesus' tomb, a basin, perhaps with water to show purity. But most of what is in the background for Jesus and Mary is more mysterious and vague, less concrete. A castle at the base of a green hill that morphs into a magical mountain. Is this the way to the kingdom? Who are all of those strange and wispy figures in the background? Angels or other strange creatures? What is happening in the midst of the clouds and bright orange opening filled with figures at the top of the strange mountain? Are they heading to heaven or to a more ominous place? The peaceful and loving, beautiful moment shared between mother and child is distinctly different from the events of the background in this painting. This is a painting with a lot of movement, whereas the painting of Renee and Simona is more reminiscent of a still life with people as the focus and peace and serenity around them.
Terrific, really terrific. One thing that you do in a lot of your writing is incredible descriptions, visual descriptions of things that you look at, and like what's in the cave, uh, the garments, the color of the garments, the mountainscape in the back. Um, I I really like that kind of descriptiveness, and it's something that should figure a way to work on this even more because I think that that type of descriptiveness is a great way to live, a great way to see things. The other comment that I would have is maybe personal, but uh, I must say to imagine my painting next to this painting is quite striking. And I can't help but think I would have never thought of this ever, ever, except for this crazy class and this crazy student. Okay, but this juxtaposition is to die for. uh,
I
so,
kept I kept looking around and I kept coming back to this.
well,
Probably 'cause
I
I
must
couldn't look
say,
at bigger things. So
I, after a very difficult start to this Zoom, um, everything's turning around. You made my day.
thanks.
Um, okay, so now I have Kathy. Is this right, Kathy?
Yes, it is, yes.
Okay, great, great.
And, just that I have a commentary on each. Okay, the Grunwald painted the Isenheim altarpiece between 1512 and 1516. It was to be the central object of devotion in the Isenheim hospital where the sick and dying, many of whom were plague sufferers, were cared for by the Brothers of St. Anthony. The focal point of the central panel is the figure of Christ crucified. His face exhibits the deep anguish of soul and body. His hands are splayed open in wrenching agony, while blood drips from his pierced scalp. Grunwald added the marks of pox to the figure of Christ as a means to relate the sufferings of Christ to the dying patients in the hospital. Christ has been referred to as a man of sorrows, acquainted with grief. Grunwald portrayed the agony of Christ's suffering as it was vividly described in the Psalms. Quote, I am poured out like water. All my bones are out of joint. They have pierced my hands and feet. I can count all my bones. This altarpiece clearly shows that Christ shared in the suffering of mankind and was evidently the intention of Grunwald. And then, as in the Grunwald's altarpiece, the central panel of the Fulbright triptych is the focal point. The engraver's tools are neatly organized around the copper plate, ready to begin the work of engraving. One-point perspective was used in the painting to move the viewer's eye from inside the studio to the outside landscape and back again. Within the central panel are posted various images of inspiration. The side panels are also seen from a frontal viewpoint, with the figures gazing out, inviting us into the painting. Each side panel has various images posted behind the figures. However, here we see both images for inspiration and images reflecting moments from their lives. Central to the narrative of the triptych is the round copper plate, which is distinct from all the rectangular shapes in the painting. The placement of the plate, as well as the golden and copper hues, give the plate prominence in the painting, expressing the significance that the art of engraving held for the artist and family at that point in their lives.
Thanks. Terrific. Really terrific. Um, uh, what question would you have, Kathy, for Lynn Jacobs?
I have to think about that too.
That's fine. That's fine. That's
Yeah.
fine. Just curious. Uh, just to go back, Kristen, did you have a question?
Sorry, I did actually have one. And it's like, I don't know if it's a good question for her or not, but it is just I kind of wonder how an artist conceptualizes such a vast painting. Um, yeah, that's one for you.
That's very good. That's very good. Um,
and
yeah,
there may be different processes for different artists
yeah,
too.
yeah, yeah. Well, you know, this is gonna sound stupid, but religion gives you that big statement, and the Last Judgment also gives you that big statement. Um, it's a bit of an irony, but with the um, lessening of religious mandates on people generally, not all the way, but generally, the subject matter in art is different. And something of those big subjects is, to me, lessened. But that's a big painting, that Grunewald painting. That's a big subject and an amazing attempt to depict this. Um, um, who did I miss in terms of a question? Oh, Susan, did you have a question for next week? Did something occur to you?
Yeah, I don't know that I have it well formulated, but it's very interesting that there are these three panels. And I was wondering how she would talk about their interrelationship. I can see them like the Garden of Earthly Delights, maybe as over time, or it's three possibilities of human beings, or as you were saying, if the story is so big, there must be different narratives. How do they fit together? And would the artist in his conception, choose one of these relationships? It seems to me that I would like to hear her talk about that.
So you should write that down for next time, for next week. We'll come back to that.
Okay.
Um, I'm trying to think of something else to say. Kathy, the your writing is in its descriptiveness is in the direction of Kristen's.
Mhm.
I think you should take it even further.
Okay.
Take it even further because there's so many things to see
Mhm.
in the world, so many things to see in life, so many things to caress or to enjoy. Um, and your eye is so visual that
Mhm.
you should push it a little more. But
Okay.
it's already quite on the way. Um, I really like that a lot, and maybe I should try to devise some way that everyone could be pushed to do more with that. Um, I have to think about that. Um, okay, so the next one I have I think, is Ron, which is this. Ron, are you here? Hello? Um, well,
Okay, here I am.
oh, you are. Okay, great,
Yeah.
great.
I've unmuted. The image on the left is from the Matthias Grunewald. It's the entombment of Christ. And the image on the right is by our mentor, Simon Dinnerstein, and is entitled Purple Haze. What I've written are reflections on these two, which come together in a form of serendipity. On this Easter day in the morning, I contemplate the corpse of Jesus, laid out by a grave as humble as his manger. Grunewald leaves us no choice but to accept the miracle of the resurrection. This person is undeniably dead. His mangled feet and hands and his whipped and beaten extremities are rigidified. His unhealed wounds gape. The lower portions of his body are darkened with pooled internal blood. His skin has a waxy pallor, and his humble loincloth is stained with his agonal excrescence. Only close family members are in attendance, and he's been denied even the ritual bathing and shroud of a Hebrew burial. The other image, Purple Haze, Gray, is one of three versions of an image by Simon Dinnerstein. I viewed it for the first time at a concert at the Library of Congress in the fall of 2022. It had been the inspiration for a musical movement in a recent work by the contemporary American composer George Crumb. Having recently attended the death of my wife, I was moved by the image, a beautiful woman, languid, immobile, suspended above the vitality of the city below. Her skin is dusky and pale, her eyes open, yet strangely unseeing. Unlike the Grunewald, the presence of life seemed fleeting and ambiguous. It was inspiring and sad. As serendipity would have it, the artist and his wife were seated in the row just in front of me. When the applause ended, I ventured to engage him in conversation. I commented, "Your image reminds me somehow of the Christ in the Grunewald altar in Colmar." He replied, "That's my favorite painting." And so our acquaintance began.
That's a really fascinating story. I mean, prophetic, actually. Um, you know what?
Simon, were there images for that one? I wasn't able to see the images.
Uh, I'm going to come back to this. I'm going to come back to this after everyone's finished. Okay, so just hold off on that. Um, uh,
See them?
so in the for the people who have spoken so far, the personalized quality of your response is what art should be about. In other words, I don't really feel that it should be in one direction or another. But if I feel that it's personalized, that's great. And what's interesting here is the personalized responses are in many different ways. And this makes me feel great. In other words, you're struck by something. It differs from person to person, but the being struck by it is what's great. Um, Ron, would you have a question for our guest next week? Does something occur to you?
I do have a question. It's been formulating, and I'd rather wait until she arrives to offer it.
Great, great, great. Um, So Denise, you're next, and this I think is yours.
Okay, but what I was asking before was I didn't get to see Ron's images that he was talking about. Were there images?
Well, there are two images on the screen. One was a detail of the Isenheim altarpiece of Grunewald, and
Okay.
the other one is a, a drawing that I did of a woman floating across the sky.
Okay. For some reason, I was unable to see those. If everybody else saw them, then
That's happened to me
Yeah,
before,
well,
Denise.
well,
okay.
Try.
we're going to come back to that
Okay.
very soon. But in the
Okay.
meantime, you go.
Oh,
This
okay.
is yours, right?
I'm not seeing those images either.
Okay, on the left-hand side is an image that we saw before of Mary and Jesus from
Right.
the Grunewald altarpiece, and on the right-hand side is an image of Christ
Right.
from
I
that altarpiece.
I know what the images are, but is everyone else seeing the images? Because for some reason
Yes.
I'm not seeing them. Okay.
Yes.
Yes, you
Yes.
must
I don't
have
need
a
to see.
minimized window.
Yeah. Denise,
Interesting.
select Renee Dinnerstein's screen from the control up at the top middle.
Okay,
And I
I
think
did it.
that's going to get you what you need.
You got
Yes,
it?
sir.
Great, great.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much.
Terrific.
Okay. So this is my observations about the Isenheim altarpiece, a polyptych. It can be displayed with 3 views, each containing a different theme. Folding forms like this were much more common north of the Alps, which was a fact that I found interesting because when I saw this back in 1986, my friend and I had just driven from Gimmewald, Switzerland, across the border to Colmar.
Hmm.
So I don't know why it's more common in the Alps, unless they're just a group of woodworkers, and maybe this whole thing was built around a wooden sculpture. But perhaps that explains it. So anyway, here goes. This is a little quote from my European travel notebook dated Monday, May 26th, 1986, which is 39 years ago.
Terrific.
Here's my little notebook.
Terrific.
I
Great.
had written a little blurb about my visit to Colmar, and I don't know. This is the extent of my little sketch. I didn't have a lot of time.
Wonderful, wonderful.
And so my just 2 lines from this says, a short drive to Colmar, France, after leaving Gimmewald, Switzerland. I visited the Unterlinden Museum to see the Eisenheim altarpiece, a 3-dimensional carved wood scene with large paintings or screens that fold over and open to change with the religious seasons. That's the end of what I had written about it. I attempted a quick sketch to remember the construction of the altarpiece, but sadly, I apparently didn't take any photos. I searched all my many slides from that trip. At the time, I was probably more impressed by the polyptych format than the actual paintings, or perhaps the screen was folded in a way that I couldn't study Grunewald's paintings. This class has given me the opportunity to delve further into the creation and history of this work of art. Specifically, though, I'd like to focus on the main figure's gestures and how Grunewald's contrast or repetition of gesture becomes transformative, the opening or interruption that allows the viewer to experience a state of vulnerability, heartbreak, health or ill health, and connects us to devotion. The D.H. Lawrence essay that you sent us made me think about the magical devotional quality of the human hand. Contrast Lawrence's description of the alive human hand to the distorted branch-like claws of the dead Christ. And that made me study that painting even a little more. I was amazed when I noticed that at the lower left of the cross, Mary Magdalene's hands were cupped and intertwined in a similar distorted fashion to Christ's. Christ's mother, Mary, is barely able to stand, her hands folded in a manner similar to the cloth that Jesus wears, or even like his strained ribs. The Apostle John's hand gently holds Mary at the waist. His fingers curve and separate in a way that echoes the rip in Christ's loincloth. To our right, John the Baptist's finger points directly in line with the face and arm of Christ, causing the viewer to focus on that scene. And John the Baptist, of course, is not a part of that scene at all. He is the predictor of this happening. So he's our narrator, maybe. Now, as to faces, the angle of Mary Magdalene's head and the curve of her mouth echo that of Christ. The Apostle John's face is very similar to Christ's in that same way. Comparing this scene to the panel depicting the birth of Christ, the baby Jesus' head and mouth is tilted very similarly to that of the crucified Christ in the other panel. Baby is swaddled in a cloth that foreshadows the crucifixion's loincloth. The baby's fingers are moving in angular ways that seem similar to those of the crucified Christ. The curves of the Virgin Mary's features at the birth of Christ are peaceful and uplifted. She has a rosy complexion. In contrast, at the crucifixion, her mouth turns downward and she's deathly white. I believe that Grunwald painted the altarpiece to communicate inexpressible truths without relying on the safety net of tradition. This uncompromising image is alive and talking to us even now. Since I'm a woodworker, my question would be, actually I'm a painter and also a woodworker. My question would be, how might I envision a painting that tackled a suitably big subject, a story that could communicate a feeling of nowness presented in triptych or polyptych form? That's it.
That's exceptional. That's really exceptional. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. You show a lot of heart. Could you, the third sentence from the end, could you read again?
About what I believe that Grunwald did when he painted that altarpiece?
Yeah.
Okay. I believe that Grunwald painted the altarpiece to communicate inexpressible truths without relying on the safety net of tradition. In other words, to me, that meant that I've seen a fair amount of religious paintings in my life, but this one went out of bounds of what that typically, what the traditional method of depicting is. So I thought that really, it's an uncompromising image that would connect with the viewer, specifically at the hospital, and would talk to you about suffering.
Could you read that sentence again?
Okay. I believe that Grunwald painted the altarpiece to communicate inexpressible truths without relying on the safety net of tradition.
Okay, so I take your sentence in a slightly different way. I take your sentence to be that if I was choosing between heart and in art and truth in art versus skill and rendering, I would choose the first. You follow? I would choose the first group.
The traditional group?
No, the other group.
Okay.
In other words, read the sentence again.
Okay. I believe that Grunwald painted the altarpiece to communicate, or his manner of painting the altarpiece, put it that way, was one of communicating inexpressible truth without relying on the safety net of tradition.
So if I took your sentence for me,
Mhm,
it would mean that if I had a choice
mhm,
between um, intensity, truth versus tradition and rendering
mhm.
and skill, I would choose the first one. If you had two directions, I came to a fork in the road and I had
Yes,
two directions,
yes,
I would choose the first one. Okay?
yes.
That's myself personally, but anyway, terrific. Um, John, I think you're next. Oh, John is in three parts. So this on the left is one, on the right is two, and this one is three.
Yeah, thanks, Simon. Yeah, in fact, I'm going to even sneak in a couple of links here that I'm going to mention along the way in the chat. Okay, well, this is a story about the most serendipitous of discoveries and where we might go from there. So last January, Renee and Simon hosted my family for a wonderful visit at their home. And I think at one point they might have thought that the highlight of the visit was going to be watching a 13-year-old boy, unaccustomed to depictions of nudity and art, try, with some success, to make himself disappear. But later,
John, if you don't mind, I just say one little thing. Your son,
what's this?
your son, this was his.
No, I think it was more. It was almost like he was trying to climb into his own pocket.
Yes,
It was head down, couldn't look up. That's its own wonderful story. Um, but later, after Simon described a connection between his work and John Williams' book Stoner, I heard someone blurting out a theory about the Fulbright Triptych as a portrait of the young artist who has found his way. And of course, it was I who was blurting. And to my amazement, Simon replied, "No one has ever said that before." And I must say, I'm pleased that he thought enough of this idea to share it with the class this term. Now, the full story of this rather accidental discovery might take us some time. So instead, I want to point out a theme that, if the theory is right, seems to run from the triptych all the way to his latest painting, Voyage, which we saw briefly recently, a theme that I've come to think of as the life of the mind. So in a dream play, this image that we have on the right here, we see the artist attempting to work, but visited by visions of his family. Are they physically present? Is Simon Ebenezer Scrooge here? No, I think these are reflections of the work, of the words, the actions, the values of family members, all surfacing in his mind, playing their part in the artist's work. And there are others in Night, which is one of these that I linked to the chat. We see children stalked by scary visions. In Sleep, the second of the items that I linked in chat, we see scenes of home materializing to a sleeping woman. And in Voyage, if we were to switch to that image, thank you, we see a boy, his toys, and images in a swirling surface. And at first, the eye interprets this surface. Is this a patterned rug? But if we look closer, we see in the middle, towards the bottom, a single block in motion, leaving a wake behind it. Suddenly, the whole image is transformed and set in motion. Are these scenes of imaginings? Are they imaginings of the viewer, of the subjects? I say, let's ask Freud. Lucian Freud is quoted as having said, every painting is a self-portrait. But Freud isn't much of a writer. Let's ask Oscar Wilde, who tells us, every portrait that is painted with feeling is a portrait of the artist, not the sitter. The sitter is merely the accident, the occasion. So perhaps these are depictions of universal moments of imagination or emotion as seen by Simon, all the way from the Fulbright Triptych through his work from time to time, all the way to his Voyage. Which of our worlds will be the world? If you are viewing a Simon Dinnerstein work, the world might be about light, it might be about color, it might be mind-boggling detail, or it might be about the magic of women. But in some of my favorite works, I think a good place to start is The Life of the Mind, as seen by Simon Dinnerstein.
Fantastic, fantastic. This little part that you've presented is 3 years of therapy for me.
I will send a suitable bill.
Ron, what do you think about that? Not bad. 10 minutes equals 3 years. John, amazing amount of. I'm sorry, Ron, go ahead. Go
You
ahead.
sometimes have to wait many years for the right moment.
Ron, you must have thought of this for a great deal of time, or mulled it over for a bit of time.
Yeah, it's fair to say that that I have gathered little bits here and there, and I'm constantly trying to integrate them. And yeah, this is if it has some ring of truth for you, Simon, then I'm glad. I did feel like I was a little bit out on a limb here.
No. You're quite on target, I think. So
I thought maybe there was something in it that would open a little bit of a window that the rest of the class might enjoy. If they hadn't thought about things that way, giving a look.
No, very, very striking. So the next one I see here is Francis. No, Francis is this one. Francis, are you here?
Yeah, I'm here. I just had to unmute
and
pull up my writing. So these are my very personal reactions to the Garden of Earthly Delights. In the central panel, everyone looks virtually the same in body shape and age, some different hair colors, with no blemishes, running sores, deformities, all of which were the norm in history, and no clothes. The beauty of this world is that without clothing, there's no hierarchy of peasant, master, lord, clergy. Everyone has equal access to the available pleasures, and no one seems to be troubled by another's enjoyment of them.
Wonderful start.
Thank you. God alone is dressed perhaps a necessary nod to the church or a belief in God's superiority, yet recognizing the frailty of people, including those of the church. That relates to what I write later. While carnal pleasures of various sorts are shown, food, drink, sex, but especially the last, they're displayed in a cool, distant way. We don't see looks of great excitement, passion, or deep enjoyment at the receipt of any of these. In hell, we see a number of clothed people, some indicating rank, such as the woman on the disc on the head of the tree man. That's the middle picture there. Others in clothing whose significance I didn't find. One demon makes me think of an inquisitor hiding its identity as it tortures. Many of the tortures are carried out by animals. Normally, they are the prey of the humans. While I cannot deny wishing evil on those who cause great suffering to others, what kind of person spends time thinking of the detailed tortures depicted in many artists' scenes of hell? To me, there's a perversity involved that should itself be considered a sin. Bosch seems to be making us, or the clergy, or both, the butt of his jokes, butt being a pun, or of his commentary with his depiction of hell. Love of music seems to be built into human DNA, yet the church deemed it evil, and musical instruments are here made instruments of torture. This was a time of religious upheaval. The Reformation was on its way, 1517 being Martin Luther. But many people were chafing at the requirements and hypocrisy and venality of the church. And because of the lowlands' religious tolerance, there was a huge influx of refugees from the Inquisition arriving also as well. So that's what I have to say about, to me, and my question for next week is about somebody more knowledgeable, maybe's religious interpretation of this picture. Because to me, it's very anti-religion.
That'll be very interesting to hear next week. I really like your choices here all the way through, and I never thought of what you said to start with, that all of these people are nude and all kind of idealized. It never even occurred to me. Have you ever seen this one in person?
No, I haven't.
I thought it was a top 10 painting for me. Really amazing. It's worth a trip. So the next one that I see is Dean. If you're here, Dean, this is yours. Is Dean here? No. Okay. Is Mary here? Mary?
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, great. Here's
I'm sorry, I couldn't find my unmute button, but go ahead, Mary.
Oh, okay. So let's go with Dean, and then we'll come to Mary.
Okay. Let's see. I'll preface this. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. I want to preface it by saying I was having a hard time getting traction. I had a couple different tracks trying to, imagine what it would have been like for a family with young kids or something, with kids in tow coming to see the Ghent altarpiece. But what I was thinking about a couple of things as far as writing on comparing two works or discussing two works, that I had a hard time maybe following your suggestions on thinking about line, color, the visual aspects of things. So I went on the computer and asked it to do a list of 100 action words that have to do with artistic form, color, and then I asked it to do something which I'm going to have a question next week about, is sort of maybe like in writing, when a form is chosen, what is choosing a form of poem, or for instance, what I'm going to have here is haiku poems, to use the form of something to pare something down. Also, I want to say, Rita, when you have discussed in the past how you go about sort of chopping down and leaving the strongest words,
Yes.
I asked the computer to write a list from weakest to strongest action words that relate to vision, and try to use those in these haiku poems to say something about these two works. And you'll find it's almost like when you use the large language model, it hallucinates. It doesn't quite know what a painting represents. For instance, the windows it maybe thinks are mirrors, or maybe the two panels with Renee and Simon, maybe it thinks those are mirrors, and it uses that in these poems instead of that they're representations. You'll see some sort of dreamlike thing. So I thought it'd be interesting to discuss these two works. So I used these haiku in a sequence, an acrostic sequence. So the first poem in this first series on the Ghent altarpiece starts with each sequential letter of the word triptych. And then the second 8 are from the first letters of the word Fulbright. So Fulbright, no, I'll start with the Ghent on the left. Ghent altarpiece, Jan van Eyck, acrostic, Triptych. T, thrones of gold, thrones of quiet gold, a lamb bleeds into still light. Heaven opens slow. R, refined every pearl, scripture locked in lace and gaze, meaning waits in folds. I, incense of detail, wing, robe, vine, and softened glass, each breath sacrament. P, panels whisper truths, veiled in sacred geometry, echoing the word.
Yeah.
T, temples of pigment, the soul crosses from dark doors to unmeasured light. Y, yearning sits in oil, eyes uplifted past the frame, time held like a prayer. C, chorales carved in paint, silent music flows through fields, the still lamb listens. H, hearts in folded hands touch a world too vast to hold, the frame cannot bind. Fulbright triptych, Simon Dinnerstein, acrostic, Fulbright. F, faces lean inward, the painter's hands old with time grasp memory's thread. U, under quiet light, pages flutter, chairs invite, the room slowly breathes. L, letters line the shelves, books that shaped a family's gaze, drawn in amber calm. B, brushwork and silence mark the hours not recorded, life's gentle rhythm. R, reflections repeat in mirror, window, and eyes, meaning turns inward. I, in this still moment, a daughter reads, future waits, and the past listens. G, gaze upon the wall, portrait, painting, self, and dream, all are part of one. H, held in triptych form, an artist offers his time, each panel a vow. And that's the end.
Wow.
Oh, that is wonderful. Really wonderful. Could you read G again from the Fulbright one?
Yes. Gaze upon the wall, portrait, painting, self, and dream, all are part of one.
Hmm. Have you written something like this before?
Yes, for the Dickinson cello player. There was
Yeah,
also an acrostic poem that I did for that.
yeah.
Very creative.
Really wonderful. Dean, you've outdid yourself.
Thank you.
Very inspiring and inspired. Really. What you wrote made me think of something. If I could interject something personally,
Sure.
it made me think that sometimes when I talk about my painting, I use an expression which I always find surprising when I hear the words coming out of my mouth. But the expression that I use is I cannot wrap my arms around this painting. I cannot wrap my arms around this painting. It eludes me. Um, do you have
Yeah.
do you have a question for our guest next week?
Yeah, I guess it is this, sort of maybe if she sees a parallel between, the triptych form and in literary works,
Huh,
and
huh,
and how the hinging or the sequencing maybe relates to literature of the time or poetry forms. Um, does it strengthen the story? I know in one of the things I was thinking about, the panels. Um, there maybe could be thought of in sequence, like the beginning, like a journey in a Christian's life,
yeah,
some sort of sacrament or sort of ritual where you go from one thing to a rebirth, and the separate panels help you do this,
yes,
so.
yes.
And a poem or something, a form can bring you through time or compare things.
You know what's interesting here? You made me think of another thing is that you referenced Rita, and it seems to me that there's been about 9 people who've read so far, and all of the 9 people, it's very pared down, very succinct and condensed in quality. Not as much as you, but generally in that direction. And it, there's a tendency to say more, to say too much, and yours is really pared down. It's very poetic, Dean, very poetic. Um,
Yeah.
the last one that I have is Mary, which is this one.
Yeah, I think I was affected by the comments about the three princes of Serendip. And I started just to write a letter to Simon, and it sort of turned into what I'll speak about. So, upon closer examination of Gregory's party, I noticed a child-sized theater on the right side of the image. The set is a triptych. The toy is an excellent gift for children, featuring miniature characters that can be moved around using magnetic wands. However, the stage set depicts old homes and castles with side panels depicting nature and the countryside. These observations led me to reflect on how childhood play introduced me to the artistic world of Simon Dinnerstein. Renee, Simon's wife, played a crucial role in this connection. It was fortunate to work with a supervisor who understood the significance of play. Renee inspired us to create an environment that encouraged young children's exploration through observation, drawing, and listening. We provided time and space for children to engage in play, and as a result, fun and creativity flourished. As an adult, Simon Dinnerstein developed these qualities of slow, deliberate observation and deep concentration. He complements his technical mastery with a serious ability to focus, integrating these skills to express novel and liberating ideas. Play is fundamental. Another fortunate encounter was having Adrian, Simon's grandson, as a student in my class. I was captivated by his slow, thoughtful gaze and whimsical nature. Adrian, by the way, has grown into a very gifted, engaging actor. Additionally, I had the pleasure of meeting Simone, Simon and Renee's daughter, and have experienced her remarkable piano performances. It was a joy to recently attend her Alice Tully Hall concert with the Juilliard String Quartet. Artistry runs deep within the Dinnerstein family. The study of triptychs has unveiled a world largely unfamiliar to me. Works of art that I had previously found overwhelming or even frightening have transformed into portals to a hyper-real realm of beauty, form, insights, and imaginings. Last year, I visited the Palmer Museum and spent some time contemplating the Fulbright Triptych. Standing before the work, I experienced an extraordinary sensation, a feeling of being transported through time and space to a reconciliation of a fractured whole, mended and integrated through artistic creation. The work serves as a testament to the everythingness of life. I have deviated in this assignment and taken great liberties to express a dream vision piece that I imagined for theater based on the Fulbright Triptych. And I've condensed it to make it a little more to fit in. In a dream, the Fulbright Triptych is magnified and fills the space with the side panels angled inward. Darkness envelops everything except the golden centerpiece, the engraving. Angela's garden. Light gradually fills the space, at first rising as dawn through the windows, then fully illuminating the triptych. A sheer screen shows a museum worker and later individuals observing the artwork. The film condenses 10 hours of visitors viewing the triptych into 1 or 2 minutes, slowing down as the last visitors leave. We hear a door closing and night falls with stars emerging. The triptych dims and a spotlight highlights various elements, including an Assyrian king sculpture, a stopwatch that sets off a ticking sound. We hear rainfall that fades into the slow dripping sounds of the tears of the Mater Dolorosa falling into the plant. Characters engage in dialogues, St. Francis on simplicity, George Geiss on his work, and artists like Seurat and Degas on their techniques. Children read aloud, and quotes from Wittgenstein and Moby Dick are heard. Sounds of war and suffering accompanying stories from photographs and letters. The cacophony of conversations and sounds builds to a crescendo and then fades. Morning light returns. The triptych comes into full light. The center work is brought into darkness, and the side panels are lighted for a minute. The panels go dark, and the center panel is lighted. Another minute, and the whole triptych is brightly shown. The entire piece then fades into darkness with only the golden engraving plate glowing. Emanating from the golden orb, an enlarged copy of Angela's garden is projected onto the invisible screen. Then the image fades back to the golden plate. The triptych is shown in full light. The end.
Terrific, really terrific. What would you ask next week?
Something I was thinking about is maybe the uh, importance of the broken places, the lines in between, and how that plays part of the space of the story.
Yeah, that's a good question. Um, so the the in the beginning of this presentation, I mentioned that I had one of the students, Anna, wrote a beautiful piece, which um, then got upended by the fact that I couldn't figure something with the Zoom. So I think what I think mentally is that I will send you her piece with the two images, and I have maybe 5 minutes, and I think in the 5 minutes I'll show you a few triptychs that I found since the first class. So let me do that. Um, this also I wanted to show, but I think it's better to show the triptychs that I found. So this one is by Robert Campen, and it's in the Cloisters Museum. It's a triptych of the Annunciation. This is a fantastic painting. It's well worth seeing in person. It's in amazing, amazing shape. Okay. It's in New York City. It's in Fort Tryon Park. It's about 170th Street, I think. Um, this is one of my favorite paintings. This is really a wacky painting. This is in the Uffizi Museum. And what's interesting here is that this is a very northern painting in Florence. And it's called the Portinari Altarpiece. It's by a painter named Hugo van der Goes. So Hugo van der Goes, you can see, was a very wrought up OCD type of personality. And you can see that there are two or three different sizes to people in this painting. Very large painting, like 17 feet wide. Um, and you see the donors on the bottom left and bottom right, and this very intense scene in the middle, and these very real images. Um, so Hugo, Hugo, VAN small, DER small, GOES large G. The Met has a painting of Hugo van der Goes. Uh, it might be a self-portrait, I can't remember, but again, very, very worked up, very intense. Um, this is a triptych of Francis Bacon, um, anamorphic forms of some violent or expressionistic background. Um, I would say that probably Francis Bacon did the most triptychs of any artist that I've encountered,
Hmm.
uh, living or dead. This sounds strange because he was quite a strange guy, but he did many triptychs, maybe rivaled by Max Beckmann. So this one is another one by Beckmann. This one here um, does many small ones, large ones. Uh, the idea of repeating forms seemed very important to him, and a certain kind of crazy combustibility in his painting. Um, okay, this is a really striking painting. Um, I can't remember if this is in the Louvre Museum or it's in the National Gallery, but it's a painting by Bellini, and not very big, but very intense. and a Bellini kind of feeling of the Italian countryside and the Italian way that form turns. Not very high, not very high at all. I came across this one. This is a triptych of Bill Viola,
Oh,
and this is very interesting. Uh, I put this together a while ago, so I may not recall this right, but I think that the idea behind this has to do with maybe a self-portrait, a young, very, very, very young child, and an older woman. Um, I don't want to guess past that, but the juxtaposition of these images is the triptych. And in in putting this sequence together, I noticed that many of his images are in the form of triptychs.
Mm.
This is very striking, I think. And they're projected images. They're quite large. They're quite large. Um, this is a painting that I've never seen and would love to see. It's, I think this is by, I think it's by Memling, and it's in Gdansk in Poland. I think Gdansk used to have a different name. I think Gdansk's previous name was Danzig.
Right.
And
Mhm.
this is a painting that looks great. Matthew, are you still here? Matthew?
Yeah.
Have you seen this painting?
I have not. I was in Gdansk once about 35 years ago, but
This
that,
doesn't.
that angel looks very familiar, the one standing on the ground with the contraption. But it's a maybe it's just Memling's style that is familiar.
Yeah, but anyway, this is one of the paintings I'd love to see. If I chose to travel to Poland. Um, uh, yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. I always do this. I mix up Poland and Czechoslovakia. That's not the right thing to do. Um,
Czech Republic.
yeah, Czech Republic. Yeah. Okay. This one is another triptych of Otto Dix, and it's called the War Triptych.
Ugh.
Um, his work is very extreme, very passionate, and no holds barred. Just goes
Wounded.
goes for the extreme parts of the human condition. And this is another triptych of Max Beckmann. Um, I believe this is in the Museum of Modern Art,
Yeah.
and I
Yes.
think this is called Departure. Um, his symbolism is a bit hard for me to understand, but his draftsmanship and the language that he uses is amazing. He's a tremendous draftsman, and um, the drawing really sits underneath the painting beautifully. Um, this is a very, very small painting, and I think this painting is in Dresden. And if I'm not mistaken, this is the cover of Lynn Jacobs' book. And I remember being astounded by the size of this. I think this painting is about 20 inches wide in total, edge to edge, 20 inches wide. This is amazing.
Mm.
Um, uh, this one, uh, I came across just recently. This is a Polish artist whose name is Jacek Jurka, Jacek, and then Yerka, Jacek Jurka. And I'm not sure what to make of it, but it's kind of interesting and definitely a triptych. Um, there's actually, if I could spend 3 or 4 minutes, I'll go back to the pictures that Ron asked me about. So Ron asked me about the picture on the right, which is Purple Haze, and what the other three parts of this triptych were. So the other two parts are the one on the left is the first one, and the one on the left here is the second one. So the way this proceeded, um, I think Ron was interested in what made up this triptych. So I did the one on the left from a model, and the one on the right, the same model, seen twice, seen twice. Then when I was doing the one on the right, I kept thinking about the one on the left. And I kept thinking of, I wonder what would happen. I wonder what would happen if the figure was exactly the same, but the background changed so that the shape of the rectangle was exactly the same, the figure was exactly the same, and the shape of the rectangle exactly the same, but the background behind this woman was different. So I did this image not from life, but from this woman in this picture. So this is the second one, and this is the exact same image as this one, as the left one. This is the exact same image. When I was doing this one, thought, of course, this would make a great triptych. And so I thought, what would follow? And for some reason or other, I thought of Purple Haze. And um, so that's how this came to be. Um, uh, think of a question for next time. Um, and this class is, in my opinion, quite remarkable. And uh, I, I'm, I hope you're enjoying it. And uh, it's very stirring to me. And really have a great week. And I'll see you next week. Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Simon.
Bye.
Take care, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks,
you,
everybody.
Simon.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Very
Simon.
much.
Bye.
Bye.
All right, Simon.
Okay. Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye-bye, Simon.
Ron, 3 years of therapy.
At least.
Yeah, in 10 minutes. In 10 minutes.
I have to share with you what I've been obsessing about now. I've been obsessing about how the loincloth is tied on the crucifixion imagery,
Huh.
whether it's tied from the left or from the right,
Oh, interesting. Interesting.
because I was just trying to think about if I were to tie a towel around myself, I would tie it with my right. I'm right-handed with my right hand, and
Yes.
it would fall in the opposite direction from the way the Grunewald falls. So would that indicate that someone else tied the loincloth on Christ, that he didn't tie it on himself?
Yeah, that's terrific. That's
So
terrific.
it just, I'll be looking at I'll be doing a lot of crotch gazing, I think, in the future.
Ron, I thought the presentations tonight were quite something.
wonderful.
Really quite something.
Really tremendous. Yeah.
A whole bunch of people outdid themselves.
It's been a stunning class. And,
Yeah, no, I mean, really outdid themselves.
I'm always so impressed with Rita's observation. She's really just amazing. Well,
Thanks.
thank you very much. We'll see you next week, and it should be really interesting.
Yeah. Thanks. Take care of yourself. Okay.
Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye-bye. I love your presentation
Thank you.
as the Prince of Serendipity.